for joining today. We're going to go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We'll start with roll call. If you want to start on that side.
Jeff Beaumont, Colin Lawson.
Zach Angelini, chair.
Brook from Vice President.
Ellen Snyder, Treasurer.
Scott Blackstone, Town Council.
Awesome. Okay, so do we have alternate members to appoint? Andrea?
Jess is not here.
Okay, all right, so we will appoint Andrea as alternate. And now we can move into public comment. Is anyone here for public comment? Okay. All right. So then we'll move to approving meeting minutes for June 11th. Do we have a motion to approve?
I have some edits. We can do that first.
Sure.
Just some minor ones. Page or number line 64. These are somewhat minor. Nostrum is Nostrom, Nostrum Farm, OM. And then line 67, it says 1, 2000, and that just should be 1200. There's an extra 0. And then 185. So this little, we were talking about the this proposal for the church off of Wally Falls Road. And around in this 185, we were talking about the adjoining Piscassic River Loisel town property. And so that's where we're talking about where it is wet. And it's got L chip and DES. So we just need to add somewhere in there that it was, we were talking about the town property at that point. Does that make sense, Ellen? Well, it is wet on theirs, but it's also wet on ours. And so the idea was putting a trail through is kind of complicated, or might be complicated. So we might just say that, I would just refer to the town property at that point, because that's kind of what we were talking about. So. Does that make sense?
Their property is one of the
Right, so we're talking about specifically Piscassic. So sort of that one, you can attribute it to me if you want, that's fine, 185. Oh yeah, and 177, that church uses the school cafeteria, I believe. Probably and the parking lot. I don't know if that's important. Yeah. The interior, yeah. School and parking lot. Yeah, that's 177. Would I add that if it wasn't said last time? About the cafeteria? Maybe you could just say school. They use the school.
Any other comments or edits?
I have one of those from my own. On line 296. I'm talking about girls missing up to 50 baby girls. They want to go to us at 50. Also, I'm right across the street.
That'd be pretty crazy.
50. I'll make a motion to approve as amended. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Awesome. All right. Great. Awesome. So now we're going to move to a presentation from Lynn Vaccaro on a Marsh Restoration project in town. So, welcome in. Oh, great. Gotcha.
A little overview, and then we'd very much welcome some comments and suggestions for us who's actually pretty familiar with this. So we are part of the restoration team. So it's on the slide there. We're present develop some restoration plans for a series of marshes, including Lubberlin Creek, which is here in Newmarket, so we thought it'd be a good time to come and chat with you all about it. But this is just to acknowledge that, restoration planning is a very long process, at least the way we're envisioning it, because we're trying to be very thoughtful about it. So we're really just in kind of the planning phase right now. So all the ideas that we're going to talk about tonight, we don't actually have money or any kind of a timeline to do any habitat improvements at this point. We're just kind of gathering input and collecting a lot of data at these sites. But we are talking about places that our organizations do own. So we're very committed to staying involved long term. These are not just sort of one and done type projects. And then our team is actually looking at all of these different marshes around Great Bay, where we're seeing some pretty similar patterns of degradation due to rising seas and coastal development and some historic land use sort of issues, historic farming that has happened in these marshes. But we're not going to talk about all of them tonight. We'll focus on Lubberlin Creek, but I'll just acknowledge that one of the other ones that we are deep in the planning process is Chapman's Landing, which I'm guessing is at least somewhat familiar to you all. This is a sort of a view from the marsh looking at the road there, Squamscott Road, where it crosses the Squamscott River. That's another one of the sites where we're doing kind of a careful restoration planning process. And at that site, what we're worried about is a lot of standing water on the marsh platform. And because it's such a familiar, you can see it from the road, I just thought I'd acknowledge that that's another place where we're kind of doing a real deep dive. And so if there's folks who have ideas for that site, if you use that site, if you care about that site, we'd welcome ideas for that too, even though that's not the one that we're talking about tonight. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Joanne at this point, because she is part of the team that takes care of the Nature Conservancy property.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to be here. We want to focus the rest of the chat mostly on Lubberlin Creek. Obviously, that's the property that's right in Newmarket, and we want to include you all in the conversation while we're early on in the restoration planning for this property. So Lubberlin Creek Preserve is owned and managed by the Nature Conservancy, which is where I work. And the aerial photo on the right shows the extent of that salt marsh. It's about 55 acres. It's at the mouth of Lubberlin Creek. Obviously, the water there flows out into the Great Bay Estuary. And it's part of the preserve that TNC owns. That's about 400 acres. And as you guys know, because you guys helped fund it, there was the culvert replacement project that happened back in 2019. It's amazing that much time has passed. And that was basically opened the door to allow for some really awesome salt marsh migration potential upstream. And then also there is just naturally marsh migration happening from the salt marsh up into the field, because we have really gradual slopes. So we're already seeing a lot of flooding, which is what those two photos on the left are showing, a lot of flooding from sea level rise. And then we're also seeing the vegetation really changing and converting to some saltier species in that sort of transition zone between the marsh and the field. And then in addition to the salt marsh migration potential, which is a benefit to the marsh in terms of its resilience for the change that's coming, we also have the salt marsh sparrows that are nesting at the site, and we want to improve the resilience for these species if we can as part of our restoration planning. So this is one of the hot spots for salt marsh sparrow nesting in the Great Bay Estuary, in conjunction with Chapman's Landing, which is the site that Lynn said we're also including in this restoration planning process. And this species is actually one of the reasons that we've paired these two sites together in our restoration planning discussion. We want to bring in, all the same experts into the conversation and make sure that, that we're doing the right thing by the sparrows when we're doing whatever, restoration plans we end up coming up with. And so at this particular site, researchers at UNH are doing right now all this mist netting, and they're putting little radio transmitters on the birds, and they're tracking their movements around, and they're being able to fine-tune their understanding of the microhabitat needs for the species, where it's nesting and how it's moving around the marsh. And that's all really great information that we're bringing to our team. And then we also just recently completed a rare plant. Actually, it was more than just rare plants. We targeted a group of plants that we really wanted to better understand where they were across these two sites. So that included a comprehensive botanical survey at Leverland Creek. So we contracted with Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens, their research botanists, and Bill Nichols at the Natural Heritage Bureau. And so together they sort of combined forces and combined their expertise to do this survey. And you can see the Aegolinus marittima, that's one of the rare species that was found at Leverland Creek, along with a number of others. And, you know, I think everyone knows there was like a lot of agricultural history, that these marshes were subjected to a lot of agricultural use. You know, when the first early settlers showed up here, this was really the only open land that was available to them for like pasturing their sheep, you know, before they cut all the trees down. And so, you know, there was efforts to drain the marshes and make them more usable for planting crops into and for pasture for their animals. And so there's this legacy of a lot of these agricultural features in the marsh today. And so what looks like this, you know, if you're at the road and you're looking, this isn't Leverland, but it's kind of, you know, a characteristic marsh, what it looks like from like far away. But when you get up close, you see that there's embankments. So these are like raised areas where there was like actively, they were trying to keep some of the salt water out or hold back some of the fresh water within the marsh. There's ditches for drainage. There's stone dams within some of the creeks and water control structures that have, a lot of them look exactly like that picture, that they're collapsed. And so even in their collapsed state, they're a bit of a tidal restriction and preventing either adequate drainage, but also like aquatic connectivity and stone roads. And I will say that we had something in that realm, either stone dam, water control structure, stone road. It was something like that. We don't really know what the use was. But at Leverland Creek, that we did remove a couple of years ago because it was acting as a partial tidal restriction. So that was something that that has, you know, improved aquatic connectivity and drainage and everything else at Leverland Creek, in addition to the Bay Road culvert replacement. So as part of this, where we're at right now in terms of with the restoration planning is we've identified kind of management units. So you can see and we came up with just names for them just so we can talk about them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 management units. They're kind of defined along a salinity gradient, like from, you know, the ones furthest out into the bay, up all the way up to Bay Road, which is pretty much the extent of the tidal reach at this point in time, even though we do imagine eventually it'll extend beyond and further up beyond the road. And then we worked with our team our project team to come up with like a series of metrics that we wanted to evaluate the marsh against, and a restoration framework for kind of stepping through like how we would evaluate these metrics in order to come up with some goals. And so you can see, I've kind of highlighted the metrics that are in like pretty good shape, you know, and then in green, and then the areas of concern are in red and orange. And so if you look across, some of the ones that are really popping out are the qualitative interpretation of change. That's like looking at air photos and seeing like, oh, we're seeing a lot of change when we look across, you know, air photo interpretation from like, you know, 50, 60 years ago to like today. And I'll show you some photos so we don't have to just look at this chart, but just know that this is where, you know, some of our right now, like where our thinking is coming, is being directed to with some of these kind of areas of concern. So actually the other one I'll draw your eye to is the ditch density. So that one is mostly orange with a couple red, couple of the management units in the red. So this particular marsh has very high density of ditches. And this is an example of like looking at air photos. So if you look at, so from 1962 to 2024, if you look at kind of the farthest right extent of the creek, you can see how the creek used to be kind of narrow, and then it's just gotten wider and wider and wider, and now you can see that we've lost a good amount of salt marsh there, and what used to be marsh is now kind of this big open ponded area in the creek itself. And if you look at this enough, you'll see there's other subtle changes, and all of them have to do with erosion of the creek edge, you know, ponding on the surface, and overall marsh loss. This is another type of data we've been collecting. This is elevation data, and we are right now, so this is like LiDAR data, and so right now we're getting, we're ground truthing this, and we have been collecting survey data out in the marsh with, survey rods and such, so that we can get a better sense of on the ground, where some of these, lower pockets are, so that we can try to figure out good drainage patterns to encourage. And this one is, the colors are tricky. But anyways, if you've got really good eyes, you can see the blue lines is the ditches, and then that chart up in the right there is showing you the linear feet of ditches in each one of those management units, and so you can see how some of them are just really, really heavily ditched. And so the issue with that is it just brings a lot of oxygenation, like a lot of oxygen into the rooting zone, which is not good for marshes because it allows for a lot of decomposition, which actually causes marsh subsidence. So then you end up with elevation loss, whereas really what we want is for the marsh to be gaining and building in elevation, especially with sea level rise, so that it doesn't end up getting overly flooded, and that we end up losing the marsh. And this one here is sort of the ponding. So if you could see Chapman's Landing, which is the property we've been comparing this one, or including in this restoration planning process, that one is like a lot of really big ponds. And so this site does have some ponding. Those brown areas are the ponds of mega pools that are showing signs of expanding. We don't have quite as many here, but we still do have them, and they are mostly associated with impoundments on the marsh surface. And then this one is just if you can see some of the ditching, but mostly I want to draw your attention to this. These are like the SLAM marsh migration models. So you can see how there is a lot of marsh migration potential at this site. That's the orange. So the blue is the existing marsh, and the orange is where our marsh could move to, which we're excited about having some good marsh migration potential here. So, we're imagining what a restored marsh could look like at these sites, and so I'm not exactly sure where these pictures are, Ram, I don't know if you know, but the image on the left shows, that's kind of like what these mega pools look like on the marsh. There's these big open pools of water, they're kind of shallow, and so with a little bit of, if you can get some of that water draining out of there, it tends to revegetate on its own, and so the restored marsh, the one on the right, you can see that the vegetation is moving in. And we've been doing some of this work. Nature Conservancy has been doing some of this work. We've piloted these two. They're very widely used restoration techniques outside of New Hampshire. They just haven't really been brought into New Hampshire until we brought them to this site. So this is Philbrook Pond in Northampton. And so this is really the first site where these two techniques have been used, and we're pretty happy with it. So it's ditch remediation, which is what's on the right. And so you can see there's a ditch there with like stakes in it, and what those stakes are holding down is mowed grass. So you go in and you mow the approach is you mow the grass, you stuff it in the creek, in the ditch, and you stake it in place, and you do that 2 to 3 years in a row so that you build up some of that grass thatch up into the ditch, and you kind of eventually close that ditch up. So you can see, like the lower picture, it's starting to grow in, which is great. And then the two pictures on the left shows kind of a before and after of runneling, or kind of the revegetation of a runneling. And a runnel is like you can see the guy, he's digging it right there. That's a runnel. So you have these mega pools and that are just being held in because there's nowhere for that water to go. And so they're just kind of create these small little water connecting pathways to connect these mega pools with existing ditches or channels, just so those pools can drain. And then those two pictures on the left are from Philbrook Pond, where these, the open and exposed sediment in those ponds is naturally revegetating. And this is just 1 year after the runnel's going in. So I'm going to pass it back to you. Talk about engagement.
Yeah. So we are in the process now of just talking to as many people as we can that have some connection to these marshes, just to really make sure we're getting kind of a very holistic picture of these marshes. They're obviously not just water and plants, but there's also people and values and, kind of human priorities that we also want to kind of take into consideration. So these are some of the groups that we're talking with. We're going to do kind of some focus groups with some of the recreational users, bird watchers and duck hunters. Yeah, so we'd be happy to share any of that information if that's of interest, or if you have ideas for other people we should talk to, we'd welcome that. And then Luke actually came to a meeting that we hosted with the Salt Marsh Task Force. So we're also very interested in getting as much kind of technical review of our ideas as possible. So this task force is a really cool group of different sort of scientists and practitioners and agency people that come together a couple times a year to just share ideas and review each other's kind of work in the salt marsh world. So we're doing our best to kind of gather all of these ideas that we get. So I'm going to just kind of list off a couple of the questions that we have for you, and we can maybe just kind of open it up for, if you have a response to any of these questions, great, or if you have just a general question that you want to ask either of us, we'd be happy to take that, and then we'll try not to take up too much of your time. So just a couple questions for you. We're just interested to hear how people kind of use and interact with these places, and if there's specific things that you really like and value about it. In terms of Leberlin Creek, are there folks who kind of use or visit that site? There is the Sweet Trail kind of cuts through and kind of ends at Leberlin Creek. It's a really nice kind of spot to reach the bay. Any? Yeah. That's a gorgeous spot.
It's kind of like out of the way if you're coming across the bay, or you don't really watch the bay, so
Right.
I don't really go up in it.
Yeah, it's kind of tucked in there.
So together, it's off of Bay Road.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I used to Sweet Trail too, walk out
Yep.
there. It's, just the scenic vista along Bay Road is beautiful.
It really is a gorgeous spot.
And I think the culvert is a pretty awesome project, and we've sort of leveraged that in a way for the project on Ash Swamp Road. So I think that's a really nice compliment to the folks who worked on it, including Joanne and everybody. So
It's nice to have the success stories
Yeah.
to point to, and
Yeah.
TNC's done such a nice job with the communications around that project too.
Yeah. No, I had a technical question.
Yeah, sure, go for it. Oh, yeah.
So the runnels, I was interested in runnels versus the ditching that was done
Yeah.
historically, and the difference.
Yeah.
And what's the difference, and what do you keep the runnels, or can you just explain all that a little bit?
Yeah, so the difference between a runnel and a ditch is the runnels are really shallow, right? They're like 30 centimeters at the most deep, and they're kind of like broad and wide, and they're really just about draining like these shallow pools. Whereas with ditches, we're done with these really deep things that went way beyond the root zone and everything, and so there's definitely concern. We don't want to go in there and start mucking around and making more ditches and things that are going to be horrible, like hard to feel, but we do need to get some of the water off. So it's like trying to do it in the minimum amount of like excavation, like digging down, but just to get that surface water off, but not going in and it's in the little hole.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when the ditches were dug, oftentimes the sediment was pulled out of the ditch and then just piled up on either side of the ditch. So it's actually not serving to kind of drain the marsh in a normal way.
Yeah, and then a lot of there's a lot of talk too about what to do with the material when we do the runnel. So at Filbert Pond, we've been making little mounds, and we're calling them sparrow nest mounds. Because the sparrows, they aren't able to find high enough ground to nest in, but that's part of the reason why they're, there's a good chance they'll be extinct in the next, 50 years or so, because they just can't seem to, the timing between the high tides each month now is like flooding the babies, and so they just don't have enough time to fledge before the high tides come in because of sea level rise. So it's really about increasing the height of the marsh so that there's some areas that they can nest in, so that they can survive basically between the highest high tides. And so we've been putting these little mounds out and helping the sparrows by trying, one or two of them. And so there's a little bit of that going on, but there's also some suggestion that we could also remove that material and then plant it, like just put it into some of those mega pools after they're drained, because then you're kind of putting in some of that root material and some of those living plants, and then those can grow out and expand in their shoot, because all these grasses are clonal, you know, so they're all going to shoot up their little roots and expand from like some stuff.
So all of that ponding in those pools, like on Chapman, that's all unnatural feature based on what they did, you know, years ago for aquaculture?
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll make any recording. Just so
Yeah,
you might want to go.
oh, is there a recording?
Yeah, just so you know.
Oh, I can stand
It's
over
like
that.
really full
Got it.
information, I just want to make sure that we get it.
Oh, yes, sorry, I didn't realize it was recording. So yeah, the ponding, all the ponding, so that is a tough question, because what we don't have is any knowledge of what the marshes looked like before the early settlers got here, because they got here and they just started ditching right away, and nobody had a camera, and nobody like took notes or anything, so we know that there probably were some ponds, but we can see what's happening out there, which is that the water's coming up, and then it's getting stuck. You can't drain because of these impoundments, like there's actual berms. And so the water is getting stuck behind these berms. And then also a lot of the ditches that were dug to try to drain the marsh have collapsed. And so they're not functioning to drain as well. So they're actually almost like little dams as well. So they're holding water back. And so a lot of the ponds, the ponding is actually like behind like a collapsed ditch as well.
Yeah.
So it's all very like, unfortunately it's all unnatural, but we don't have a natural state to go back to. But what we can do is try to manage what we have so that we can encourage peat growth and like a healthy marsh processes.
I know there's like little fish
Yes.
and stuff, and so my thought was, if you remove that ponding, I know that keeps like the mosquito population down. How will that? I mean, we're already pretty bad with like the daytime mosquitoes.
Yep.
We don't spray in Newmarket, but I know they spray Chapman's Landing fairly significantly. So,
Yeah.
like I know that, like I worked in mosquito control in summers when I was in college, and they always said that those ditches, like in Hampton, that was to serve to kind of drain the water, and then we never saw larvae on those marshes because all that water like drained, and they were like, this is the greatest thing we ditch every marsh. And they had no, you know what I mean? Nobody did that anymore. There was no manpower, but I think Hampton like kind of redid their ditches in some places. So I don't know. I was just thinking about like the mosquito control factor, and that wasn't on your list of like interested parties. I mean, I know they're coming from a different perspective, but the like Stratum definitely spends a significant budget on larval mosquito control.
Right. Yeah.
Are there places around the world where there are untouched similar marsh where they're satelliting or something, or people have done studies that anywhere, it could be like in the northern
Really good point.
There are marshes that have not been ditched for agricultural purposes that maybe kind of show natural ponding or just a natural state.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a little tricky because like the tidal range, like so many things are really local. But it's a good point. I would think that if there was, the recording could have brought that into the conversation. But I'm going to ask Dave that question.
I mean, I have some of those stories too to share, right? Because I think you guys are also raising, like, okay, how are you going to talk about this process of restoration?
Right.
You're filling one ditch and digging another. Like, there's a different telling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The deeper ditches were to drain like the saturated soil, right? Lower in the marsh, not
Yes.
to drain the surface. Because once you get really high, then you expose and the water goes out to the negative pressure.
Right.
Like on the ground, it's perfect. It's kind of
Yeah, there was like,
they did upland wetlands, right?
yeah, there was like 2 rounds of ditches, because the original ditches were from the early settlers to try to create agricultural land, and then the second round of ditches was for mosquito control. What happened into that was.
What's that?
because they
They
put-
drained into the pasture.
Yeah.
They put cattle out there, didn't they? They tried to put cattle.
Yeah, it's crazy. They've so Jeff Wilson with Northeast Wetland Restoration has done like a ton of research into like agricultural uses of the marshes in the Northeast, and found all these photos.
Yeah.
And he's got all these great photos of like you know, obviously that we all know about the staddles and them piling up the salt hay and gathering salt hay, but a lot of the embankments and that were across the marsh like this, so if the marsh is drained this way, he's seen evidence and like pictures and everything and drawings and like handwritten notes and stuff about how in the upper watershed, like where it was more brackish, there'd be an impoundment put across to try to keep that more fresh, and then it was actually planted with crops. Yeah, which I didn't realize, but we have exactly that at Leverland. If you're walking around at Leverland, there's like this embankment way up high in the watershed.
Yeah, I know places that was around, and there's fence posts on this like berm. We're like, what is this berm?
Yeah, and it was probably to keep the salt out, and then they would have planted back there like crops. Yeah. So I think it was like sort of tiered in a way, you know, and it was like more salty stuff they did what they could, but as it got a little drier, they would maybe hay, and then as it got a little drier and more fresh, they would like cover crops, and I don't know. Yeah.
Like this, the stone berm across the creek, is that, was that part of the father's mill? Because I believe daughter of John Barber was the first settler there, and
Right.
he had a mill. I don't know if it was a cod mill, probably. Did that help him down for it?
Right. I don't know if there was ever a mill right there. I always thought of it as a farm crossing. We always just call it the farm crossing because it's quite narrow, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right?
I surveyed that property.
Yeah. You were there.
Concerns about further
Right.
protection
Right.
happening there.
Right. So I don't know if it was like enough stuff there to support like a big mill, like
Or
or
it's 16,
yeah.
like a lot.
Right.
Might not be right enough for them.
Right. Right. But there definitely was something there. Yeah, and it was all collapsed into the channel. Yeah.
That's how we got across from this.
Yeah. You can't walk across there anymore.
I love that.
Remove the rocks. You can't walk there anymore.
That's good.
I like how you're gonna address that, like, I don't know if that's the same photo, but that out where it's like eroding away, that portion of the marsh and reclaim that. I think that's a good idea, because it's only gonna get worse.
Right. And that is actually, you know what's funny? That is the exact same spot. And that wasn't even planned, and that's good that you noticed that. Yeah, that is the same spot. And yeah, that'll be part of the discussions. I mean, at this point, I don't know if we can bring the marsh back. You know, there'll be certain things we can do and certain things we can't do, you know, and so where it's been lost to that degree, there might be things we can try and pilot, but it's definitely more about like keeping the marsh what we have, like improving the health and resilience of what we have and trying not to lose any more.
Are you seeing marsh plants at the north side of the road, on the other side of the
No, and I love that question because I keep watching, but what we're seeing is the tide. So the high tide does push up, but it's very fresh. So I have like a little salinity meter, and so if I go over there, there's no salt water there. So it's moving up and down, but it's fresh water.
Interesting.
We're seeing that salt.
Yeah. Yeah, so you gotta give it a bit more time, yeah. But it'll creep back there.
Have you observed any like success with the mounds for the sparrows?
No, it's all
new?
so brand new.
Yeah.
And I will say that the sparrow like researchers aren't like a huge fan of them because they think that they have to balance like what you do for creating nest habitat with creating something that's really obvious for predators, because that's the other thing. So like a lot of the nests that are pretty obvious, they just get like predated. So if you make a nice little mound and they happen to find a nest on it, then the chances of it getting predated are pretty high, I guess. So, but it's like, what can you do?
They nest in the birdhouses though? Is that the same species that would be in those birdhouses?
No, they're so specialists. They're like marsh specialists, and so what they do is they kind of weave a little nest under, like, you know, if you walk around in a salt marsh, it's a lot of like floppy hay, salt hay, you know, it's flops down like this, and so they'll find one of those tufts that's like bent over, and then they make a little nest like under that, so it's like a little hat over them, so you don't get like rain on it. Yeah, so they wouldn't nest in a box. Yeah, we gotta teach them how to do that.
The research center was I spoke with them maybe 5 or 10 years ago now. There were different rods around the different parts of the bay and the marshes to monitor the elevation of the surface of the marshes. Have they implemented that, and have they seen, were they looking for accumulation or
Yeah,
I haven't seen
so the sediment elevation tables, so those are up, so they have 3 marshes, Bunker Creek, Wiggin Farms, and Ribbon just get several sediment. So those are their 3 like sentinel marsh sites. And so I think at every one of those are their sediment elevation tables. I know they've been, they've been doing all sorts of monitoring at all of those sites. And so, yeah, they're able to track like how much sediment is being built up at those sites. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's definitely building. It's just not building at a pace that's matching sea level rise. So. Oh, yeah. Yeah, like a lot of what, so we're not, at this point like this may become part of the conversation, and something that people are doing further south of New Hampshire is the thin layer placement, which is like where you actually take sediment and you like spray it or place it all over the marsh to actually actively build up material that the marsh can then grow on. Maybe that's something we would try to pilot at some point. If we had to, if there was a marsh that was really collapsing. There's people that would love to do that.
Where did they get the material from to do that?
Mostly it's done in conjunction with dredging. So like if there was a channel being dredged, so like in Hampton, where they're
so it's local material that you're using to.
And then they just like put it right there on the marsh right there. So the fact that we don't have any like close dredging, that would make it difficult in Great Bay.
There's a significant loss of marsh over by that bridge, right? The new bridge we're constructing.
Yes.
Yeah, on the south side of it. Yeah, we have a survey point out in the marsh.
And
So we
it's
have
gone?
photographs of the survey point being set, and then the marsh edge getting closer, and then the concrete pillar falling into the water.
Wow, really? Over what period of time?
Just since they started building the bridge.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty short period of time.
Wait, where's the bridge?
Like 30 feet or 50 feet.
Unbelievable.
The big one just south of
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because the new bridge changed the hydrodynamics or something. That's what I
That's
heard.
crazy. I couldn't believe it when it showed me the pictures of it.
Yeah.
Just pop up here, just kind of the other questions that we're kind of interested in. And I think just in the interest of time, we do have a little survey that we're putting out, and we'll send it to you and invite you if you want to share any additional ideas or if you want to forward it to anybody that you think might have some suggestions for us. But it's just so great to hear from folks like you who've been watching these marshes over time and just, what are you noticing? What would you like to improve? What sort of questions and concerns would you raise, right? I think it really, we're so nervous, I think, about sort of screwing up. Like just knowing that, right, there's been mistakes made in the past around ecological restoration. And so we are very much believe that like as many brains as we can kind of thinking about it can kind of push us to make sure that we're, thinking about it as clearly as we can and also being sort of eyes wide open about maybe some of the trade-offs that there might be. You raised that point about, the pools and they support fish and they support birds. Are we going to drain them? It's good for this, but maybe a little less good for that. Like just be kind of honest about some of those trade-offs. And then just, also just being cognizant of how people are using it and make sure if we do have trucks and researchers out there, whatever, that we can kind of minimize impacts. If there's any additional comments, we will happily take them. Otherwise, we can follow up to that email. Yeah, did you want to say something else, Brad?
I'm just curious if, does anyone see folks using those pools for recreation? Is that some pushback you anticipate?
Well, I think birders for sure, right? They are pretty popular bird watching spots. Those big pools of water. Certain ducks use them. There are hot spots for aquatic insects and for the small mummy chugs. So I think that's kind of one of the trade-offs is it's good for the aquatic birds, but it's not as good for the things like the salt marsh sparrows that are now moving on to this very threatened list.
Are any of the pools accessible enough for kayakers or that?
They're very
No.
shallow
Yeah, okay.
and also very mucky. Like if you were to walk into them, you would regret that decision pretty quickly. Yeah.
Well,
I will
good.
say, and even that creek, it's funny because that creek, I've canoed that creek and it's fun, but it's difficult to figure out how to get into it because of the extent of the mud flat beyond there. So I haven't really seen a lot of recreation. This is where it's nice, like if you guys have you might have a different perspective of like the town use and like what people might be doing out there, but from my perspective, the main users are hunters and bird watchers, and then people, just like what you were saying, Ellen, like just appreciating the view and the vista, like from the road, or like walking by or driving by or coming to the office or walking on the trails and just kind of appreciating the vista and the view. So if there's something else that you think we should build into that in terms of like how the community values this place, so that we make sure we're
I was gonna say, when you guys have had events, I've brought my kids there.
Yeah.
When they were like, they'd follow me around and we'd walk down the trail and like look at stuff.
nice.
And so I've definitely been over there for that.
Yeah.
But I just think like the intrinsic value of the habitat
Yeah.
is good enough.
Oh yeah. I mean, for Newmarket to have this is a great thing for your town.
I
Yeah.
think that maybe people would be concerned about like water, if there are basements, you know what I mean? I don't know. Some of the neighborhoods that are around there,
Yeah.
if that would affect their water in their basement or their yard, or if the habitat would move out further and then, create more salt marsh where there isn't any. I mean, I would think that's great, but, probably not everybody agrees.
Right.
And there are, for the Chapman's Landing Marsh, one of the interesting things there is some of the abutters are farmers. The land is under agricultural lease. So there is some like trade-offs there. If you're encouraging marshes to kind of migrate up into that, what are the potential implications there?
Yeah. Lots of farmland.
Yeah.
Have they been like directly engaged at all to make
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, the two places that are right next to Chapman's Landing, we have a very close relationship with them, because in some cases it's either Cushing Green owns it, or we sort of oversee the easement that's there. And so so far they've been pretty open to kind of conversations about it. We're at the early stages, It would likely be just like a little experimental thing along the edge of a field, at this point. But we're intrigued by some of those spots, because it could be a neat place to really kind of like watch this sort of process of kind of marsh migration inland, and maybe we could do some little interventions to see if we can help it sort of enable it to sort of reestablish successfully in some of those new places.
Well, sort of regardless of what you do with the sea level rise, it's going to move in anyways,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yep.
Oh, things are changing.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of like, can we do things to facilitate change in a positive way, and also to just not let things collapse as part of this change, but to build the resilience of the system, to be able to adapt to the change. That's kind of our high level rule.
This is great. You guys had great questions.
I
It's
know.
like a really fun group to talk to. And clearly, they've got some personal experience too with surveying and mosquito work. And
Yes, that's great.
kayaking, and so it's fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Super informative. And I'm happy to stay updated as you progress, and reach out with if we can give any further input. Definitely happy to.
Awesome. Yeah. We definitely see other opportunities. We're going to try to connect with the folks in Newton Point, for example. I don't think they're going to have concerns about like basement flooding specifically. Fortunately, that's not these marshes, unlike maybe Hampton or other parts of New Hampshire. But if there's other groups that you think would be interested, let us know.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
Amazing.
You guys been on with
Thank
us
you
here.
all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Actually, do you see turtles going down the creek at all?
Sometimes there's snapping turtles that will go down there, which is weird, right? Because it's salty, but they don't really hang out down there. They'll go down and then yeah.
I wrote that down.
Right?
Yeah,
Totally.
Totally. Yep. Yeah.
Adapt to the future.
Yeah,
we should-
boom.
Well, they
Love it.
like to do the, digging and the nesting on the sides of the road, unfortunately, right by the culvert. So they're attracted to that. But they do. Yeah, we should do that.
Yes, I should. I wrote it down before you said it.
handouts we've been working on that are all about kind of stewarding the salt marsh.
Okay.
For folks who might have questions about their own home and their own yard that's touching salt marshes, we do have a bunch of products that's ready to kind of talk to people about that.
Oh, great.
Hopefully just leave us back and it could end up in wherever, in town hall. And we do like a little mailing to it. We want the one to them for folks who,
Great.
are close to tidal waters, who love to support that. Yeah.
Awesome. Where, do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Do you know, Ellen, like where we could leave those? Or
Probably in the planning office. Yeah.
right, yeah, awesome. Great. Yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again. Appreciate it. Awesome. All right, so we will move on to our treasurer's report. Trying to jump in on it.
All right. So I think it's in your packet if you want to look. So the Conservation Commission fund balance is $139,752.83. The Shanda fund has been moved out of our account, so that is moved on to a town, so we won't be reporting that anymore. Anything of note, we have interest, of course. We've got, we had the Appledore Real Estate $250 donation that was a pass-through to the Rain Barrel Company. Two students donated $400 for the bike rack for Heron Point. And we did get, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we did get the grants from LRAC for the two projects they were going to do. And so the nice thing about LRAC is they give you 50% of your grant up front. So that's $1,500 a piece. So we got $3,000 from LRAC. I think those are the main things there. Any questions about Conservation Fund? Just a reminder that we had originally allocated the $13,000 for Mitchell, and that hadn't been taken out yet, and so it's just been removed because they didn't need our money for that money. So that's awesome. I think that's everything for that. Okay, so the general fund balance is $2,413.42. And since this is the end of the fiscal year, June 30th was the end of the fiscal year, those will probably be, we did have some money left over, as you can see, so that goes back into the town general fund, I guess. And any questions about that one?
Oh, just looking up the Turtle Fest total.
Yeah.
We did well with that. So
Oh, we did really well with
the sponsor.
Yeah, we did really well with the 1,900 total, and then a lot of sales and so forth. So yeah, we did very well, which enabled us to fund the CELT camp. We paid for the speakers, of course. We gave a camp scholarship to CELT, or for a Newmarket student to go to the CELT camp. We donated to New Hampshire Turtle Rescue, and we've set aside, as you look down below, we've allocated $5,000 for the Asphalt Road project. So between last year and, last Turtle Fest and this Turtle Fest, I think we raised like half of that in terms of the net profit from Turtle Fest, so we're doing very well. And okay, I think that's it for the financial report. And I have a request if we could move up the land stewardship section to now.
Do you need a motion?
Yeah, you probably should make a motion to change the agenda.
Motion to move land stewardship as our next agenda item after treasurer's report.
I'll make that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Great. So just real quick, and then we have our guest here. So the Folletts Brook NRI and the Wiggin Farm Land Management Plan, we got the $13,000 for each from Great Bay Partnership, and we did get $3,000 each as the match from the Lamprey River Advisory Committee. So we're fully funded to go ahead. We've sent out an RFPs for each of those. We originally had a deadline for July 17th, but it turned out that was a little bit tight turnaround. People were in the field, people that might be applying, and so we've extended that to July 31st for anybody who's interested. Those get submitted to Bridget in the planning office. So what I'm recommending is that I talked to Bart about this, is that we form a little subcommittee that reviews the proposals when they come in. And Bart suggested himself, Bridget, myself, Lindsay Butler, the town engineer, and I asked Jeff if he would be willing to be on that subcommittee. And so we would review those and select the contractor for each of those. It could be the same or it could be two different contractors. And then, so this would be, in August, and we could just bring those back to the Conservation Commission for final approval at our September meeting, which is probably the best process. If that sounds good to everybody, that we would just go ahead and do that. I don't think we need a motion for that, but that's just what we're proposing for the process. That sounds okay? Awesome. So I wanted, remember last meeting we approved a contract to hire Veronique Luddington to help us with stewardship, particularly volunteer work days. And Veronique is here. Welcome, Veronique. Thanks for coming. Thought it would be a good idea for you folks to meet her. I've worked with her a number of times, and she's the Durham Land Stewardship Coordinator. Just want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm the Durham Land Stewardship Coordinator, and before I was the Assistant Stewardship Coordinator at Great Bay Estuarine Reserve. So, and I organize a lot of work group. I have a whole group of trail stewards, and I really actually enjoy working with different groups of people and everything. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I'm happy to help with the properties we already visited and work on the plan. And yeah.
Okay. Any questions for me? So I think what we'll do is we'll just draft up a pretty simple contract and spell out what we talked about before in some of the properties to organize some work days, mostly around invasive plants, but maybe could be some trail stuff too, so forth. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm excited to be working with you.
Same here. Great to meet you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Veronique.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
You as well.
Any other questions about land stewardship? It's probably other things, but yeah, those are the main things under that. And then,
Awesome. All right. Then we'll move on to land protection.
All right. So actually, Bart Ben Engel from CELT and I met with Wayne Rosa today because the boundary survey is underway. And as you know, we have this Durham Newmarket, and we weren't quite sure where the Durham Newmarket boundary was, and so he staked that first, the surveyor. So we went out and looked at it, and it's going to line up very nicely. So the family cemetery will be on the Newmarket side, so that will be in the conservation easement, which is great. And Wayne does a lot of stonework. It was his business and still does it. And so there's a lot of stone piles, and almost all of that is on the easement as well in Newmarket. So it won't be on the fee-owned property that the town will own, and it won't be under LCHIP grant agreement. So that's good. So that's actually the best outcome that we could have hoped for, the line. And Wayne was very happy with that, is how the line landed up. So we're in good shape. So Paul, the surveyor, still needs to survey, obviously, both parcels. At that point, we'll know the acreage, and then we can really start to finalize the easements. But we're in the process of drafting the conservation easement for the Newmarket piece, and the town attorney will work on a warranty deed for the acquisition, and we've got a bunch of paperwork for LCHIP. All the other grants they're pretty easy. LCHIP is a little complicated, but we'll get there. So we're essentially in the due diligence phase. We still hope to close by October 1st. That's sort of the docket, so we're about 3 months out from that. So really it's the boundary survey is the last major thing, and then the other work. And CELT will do baseline documentation with some of our input, I think. Some of it is for us to fill out, so they'll do that. And the town attorney will do the title work and so forth, so we're in pretty good shape.
Remind me how many acres?
So the tax parcel says it's 24 acres in Durham, and it's about 16 acres in Newmarket. Hopefully it'll come out pretty close to that and not wildly off from that. Should be. The polygons show it's roughly that when you do it in GIS. So hopefully it'll be good. Yeah. And then the Mitchell project. So I went to the closing on June 12th. As you may recall, the Southeast Land Trust had to do some complicated work to close so they could actually acquire it in fee. And we contributed the $87,500 from the town bond. So that pretty much used up, the 2002 bond finally, which is great. It's a great project for that. So they're not really saying that this is now closed because the conservation easement is not yet on the property. And that is still waiting on Fish and Game. And so they're not really sort of advertising that, okay, we finalized this project. So but that part was done, and so that parcel on the west side is now owned by Southeast Land Trust. But there will be a conservation easement eventually. And that will hopefully occur at the same time that the state acquires the other side, which is a fee acquisition. So, but we made progress. And we contributed our amount, which I think was great. And so, moving ahead.
Awesome. Any other questions, thoughts on that? All good? Awesome. Thank you, Alan. All right, so moving to our committee board reports, we can start with town council.
Town council's on summer schedule, so we haven't in this cycle.
Cool. So then planning board, planning department.
We actually met just before the last meeting, and we'll meet for next week. A big pass on, we had Andrea volunteered to be the full-time member.
Thank you, Andrea.
And we had Elizabeth Dudley volunteered to be the alternate, and so I could pass the names along this week to Bridget. It sounded like they wanted to hear that or appoint them at our next meeting. Like next week, maybe? I couldn't quite tell from the email. So,
Yeah, there was something in our emails about email Bart. If you're interested, should I follow up with him?
well, that's why I sent that email because I was supposed to pass it along, pass the name, or they had asked, like, have Zach pass the name along, and then we didn't have a second person yet, and then you volunteered to do email, so I just passed both names along the email. So I'm not sure exactly the process because Bridget did not respond. Besides saying thank you. Yeah, so.
Well, Zach,
Yeah, I can
email
follow up with Bridget and see.
Yeah.
Or is there, should I follow up with Bart?
Yeah, Bart or Bridget, doesn't matter, yeah.
Yeah, maybe shoot them.
So you guys meet Tuesday at 7?
I put them all on the email, so everyone that's volunteering is on the email chain. So if you do ask if they should be present, you reply to that chain, everyone will know. I don't think that doesn't swear you in necessarily because it's not.
I don't think so. I think that they're already sworn into town, right? Based on, yeah.
It's appointed to a committee, so I'm not exactly always there. I have anything
No, that's
on that
okay.
one.
I guess if they want me, they'll call me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Wait to be summoned.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I'm sure Bart's ready
Yeah.
to put together a meeting or something in there, or action needs to be taken on the part. I'm sure to let you know. And then I will say that we are going to have our, I believe we're having a public hearing on the master plan. There's one.
Yeah, I was looking online and not every portion is available. It seemed like, because I was trying to, there's, they've got it divided into various categories, and I figure, our interest is in the environmental category, and that was it was listed there, but it wasn't like a link that I could click on to read about it.
I'll shoot you an email.
Yeah, maybe I'm looking in the wrong spot, but it seemed like only the first 2 portions had been uploaded onto the town website.
Yeah,
And then they had, a million subset, well, 5 or 6 different things within the plan that were like, the title was there, but it wasn't like I could click and read it.
It should be in the link for our meeting Tuesday.
Okay, I'll check for that.
Yeah, it should be one of the attachments there.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question, if you know, or maybe, when we were working on our portion, there was going to be these tables at the end of all the implementation steps. Is that coming later, or those have been done as well already? They're all there too?
Yeah, they should be.
Okay.
It was, last we met, it was just some format in there.
Okay.
More or less, because it was like, had been, put the PDF, but then, we can just go from a Word document to a PDF, it got a little jumbled. So there was cleaning up to go back from you, is my understanding.
Yeah, folks might want to look, 'cause I'm not sure we ever looked, we never kind of saw the finished product in terms of that implementation chart for our, whatever they're calling it, whatever, I forget what we came up with, the name that they came up with.
Yeah, it should be there.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't clicked on the link for you on Tuesday.
So maybe maybe worth people taking a look just to.
Yeah, so I'll shoot our email tomorrow, or tonight, and I'll click on the link as well and see what it is. And then I would just ask you if you have any of the TRCs and
Yeah, nothing new.
nothing.
Yeah, I don't know anything.
We can come back on.
Nothing yet.
I know we are hearing, I think, some more of the preliminary design stuff on the Elm Street Warren project.
Hmm.
You can always speak prior,
Oh, okay.
right? But if it's on the agenda, you should be able to, if it's on the
Yeah.
agenda, there's usually a public comment.
Yeah, and if
It
folks
was
have
input
opinions.
last time, this was been 2 months since they.
Thank you, Joe. All right, I think that is all of our reports then. So moving on to other business updates. So we talked about long range planning subcommittee. I'll send. What's that?
Sorry about
Oh,
that.
no worries. All good. Good transition. I'll follow up with Bart and Bridget on what the next step is there. Then just quickly, quick Turtle Fest update. I did reach out to Word Barn and Brett at the Harris Center, which are kind of key players, to see which of those 3 dates that we were thinking about can work for them. I haven't heard back yet, but once I do, then we'll land a date and move on to next steps there. Yep.
Sorry, I forgot to do something under finances. We usually submit our general fund budget for the next fiscal year, to be next July 1st, and I did include that. It's in your packet. If you just want to flip that real quick, it says page 15 of 18, I believe. So I included a table. It shows what we got in FY25, FY26, and this is it. We're in the midst of FY27. We're starting FY27 as of July 1st. And so I just tweaked the numbers a little bit. I feel like we've done pretty well. And this, I just reduced it a little bit, just out of good faith, and shifted a little bit around, a little bit more into general supplies, and just reduced the contracted services just based on, I think, what we're going to spend. And then reduce the part-time salaries, because we really haven't spent all that amount. So it'd be good to endorse or take a vote on this, because we don't meet in August, and it'd be good to get this to Bart, because they start talking about it, I think, in September. And a two-part to this, it's not really a two-part, but maybe after this, I know Ellen, this is, I think, her last meeting, and so I thought we should thank her, but also there was maybe a brief discussion about what we're going to do after this.
Yes.
So, anyway, maybe we could focus on this proposed budget if it looks good, or if you suggest any changes.
So we're not reducing like the hourly rate of the part-time person, we just have too much money under that line
Yeah,
item?
and we just haven't, the minute takers have been very efficient.
Okay,
So we haven't needed that much money, but we don't want to get rid of it, because we are going to need a minute taker.
well, oh yeah,
Going
sure, I
forward,
just
yeah.
don't wanna
Yeah.
reduce their pay.
No, we can't do that. That's actually set by the town, so we
Oh,
don't
okay.
really get involved for
Okay.
that. And,
Okay,
I mean, the town manager may come back and say, no, you need to keep that money there or something, so that's fine. I mean, they'll modify this to make sure we handle that responsibility, so.
So do we motion to approve
Yeah,
this
we
then?
motioned to approve this, and then we would send this forward to Bart.
Motion.
Yeah, so I'd make a motion, I guess, to approve this proposal.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Please.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So, the $16,000,
Yeah,
where does that come from?
this is the general fund account money that we get.
Does it,
In
right,
the
so that comes from the
general
budget?
fund. General fund, and it expires at the end of the year.
Right, but it goes in, it would
Yeah, the
go
budget
in
process, yeah,
the-
Bart
yeah.
usually, Bart puts it in for us now, as
Right.
part of his,
Okay.
yeah. So we did reduce it by $600 from this current fiscal year, just because I know things are, a little tight. Yeah,
So then the money, just for my information, so the money from like Turtle Fest and stuff,
that's conservation fund. That goes into the conservation fund.
that's a separate fund?
Yeah, that's how it lapses, it doesn't lapse. Yeah, we use this for very specific purposes, for the minute taker, for contracted services, like with
Very neat.
Veronique, and with the Southeast Land Trust does the easement monitoring for us. The subscriptions, we belong to the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commission, so that's an annual dues. I beefed up supplies because we've been needing to buy things like, we might need signs and signage, some of the stewardship stuff we need, but actual supplies, I think it's helpful if we can take it out of the, this general fund budget, so.
So this is just to run the committee.
Exactly, yeah, sort of the nuts and bolts of the day-to-day
Right.
operation,
Okay,
exactly. Yep.
Does that supplies or cover, or did we ever finalize using some budget for like equipment for big night?
We could use some of this. We have a little bit that we bought through our previous supply budget, but I thought since we don't really have a plan yet for big night, we
Yeah.
should probably,
Wait,
and we might be able to get a partial grant too to help with that. So we've got
Yeah.
some money to use there.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Great. So then for minute taker, we discussed there being.
Do we vote? Do we do? We have to have a final vote on this. I think we
I
just
thought we
did.
did.
Second. I don't think we had a final vote, did we?
We
Do
did the aye.
Okay.
We did, I thought it was just a motion.
No, we said.
Okay.
We did.
So that, what's our
We
minutes
had a
taker?
question after, but.
Oh, that's right.
You approve.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
I'll pause a little longer for discussion next time. Okay, so then meeting minutes. We had chatted about just there being 3 options going forward. Being hiring another person to attend meetings in person, having someone watch the meetings and do meeting minutes that way, or there's also the option of a AI companion note taker. My feeling personally is that if we did the AI option, there would be more work on us to like check those and make sure it's right. So I would like to stay with a live meeting taker human. Yeah. But yeah, why don't you just raise that for any discussion?
Yeah, and I think I don't know if people have watched the town meetings, but the recordings, sometimes you can't really understand them, and so I think having somebody take the minutes from the recording is very difficult. And,
Especially without the in-person contact.
Yeah.
Right.
Further reviewing.
So my understanding from Bart is that he did post the opening, and there are a few people that have expressed some interest, so it sounds like, yeah.
So do we need a motion?
No, we don't,
or
that's,
just-
Bart
okay.
takes care of all that,
Okay,
unfortunately, so
great.
we don't have to do anything. Yeah, thank you.
Huge thank you, Ellen. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Any other business?
I have one tiny business. So down at Shopmeyer Park, that portion of the dock has broken off. So it like is a T-shaped dock, and then at the bottom of the T, there's like 1, 2 sort of lower tiers, and the more outer lower tier is broken off and kind of tied up to the upland T. And that had like a hoop that went around that was kind of an accessibility to allow people to get in and out of a kayak comfortably if they had some, mobility type of issues. So I wondered who is responsible for repairing or doing something with that.
That is DPW and the rec department.
Okay.
We actually have no role at Shopmeyer Park.
Okay.
So,
All right.
The
yeah.
pipes have been removed.
I saw the pipes under where they put the kayak, and I didn't know who.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe I can just reattach this, but then I was like, no.
It's gotta be wired.
Well, that portion of the dock I think can be set back on there, but I don't know how.
Yeah, I think DPW installs and takes it out, so they would be the one probably to
Okay.
take it. But Amy kind of oversees the whole,
Yeah,
the kayaking
I
thing.
would call Amy and
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
get it fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they must be aware, because I think, how long has it been like that?
Mm.
They did take that high piece that was broken.
Yeah,
So that was a dangerous piece, and they took all those out of there last time I was there, which
Yeah.
was, 4 days ago or whatever.
yeah, I saw some broken pipe underneath. It must be in the works, okay. That was all.
Any other topics?
They did overgrade out of the,
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
culvert there on that one road.
Yep. Yeah, Lindsay shot us an email saying that. So yeah, good news. Yeah, no, should have shared
So
it.
thank you, DPW.
Yeah,
Yeah.
big thank you for that.
What's the direction you can forward to get that out? And that's seemingly completely up to them. They remove it when we ask them to, and then I think they put it back in when they, I'm not sure what drives them or what moment they decide.
I see beaver doing something, I don't know.
I haven't seen any activity in the lodge has not been added to in a while. It's very sticks in their plants, and I'm bad with the large white cranes.
Egrets?
Hanging out there the other day, just standing on the view line.
Maybe the storms, they wash sticks into the culvert and they don't want that, I don't know. Maybe.
It's still full of water. You can actually change the water level, which is really good. And then pull it out because there's a lot of melting vegetation stuff to it. I'd say it's probably been the slowest rain we've ever seen now.
Yeah,
Very
I didn't see a lot this year.
We had a 3-legged dragon the other day. Yeah, Shannon almost brought it, but it was healed with 3 legs.
Wow,
And she put it back on the other side of the river.
awesome.
All right. Well, if nothing else, then just a reminder that we will not have our August meeting. So we will see everyone again in September. All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.